Yo, what is good, everybody? For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ryan Tewksbury, host of Tewks Talks podcast and creator of Tewks Talks Everything Else. This week, we're talking 2024 Genesis Scottish Open. You've got the Genesis Scottish Open this week, and then we'll have the British Open, or just what's now known as the Open, next weekend. Before we get into that, I would actually like to get into last week's event, the John Deere Classic. And boy, was it a classic. Yeah. Davis Thompson ran away with it. A lot of people have been complaining about these non-signature events not being interesting. I think they've been really interesting. We got to learn a lot about Davis Thompson, who's a tremendous golfer, and a few other young players, or a couple other young players at least. Luke Clanton, who everyone's talking about, the amateur from Florida State. He started with a 63 and he finished with a 63. That got him a tied second finish as an amateur. Another great finish from a young up-and-coming elite player, Michael Thorbjornsen. Sorry, I have to practice because we're going to be saying his name over and over again, not just this season, but in many seasons to come. Michael was number one on the PGA Tour U list coming out of college when he declared to become a pro a few weeks ago. And since that time, has just been progressively getting better. Like I said, it's only been a few weeks. But in this tournament, he also finished tied second with Luke. And he himself had a 64 in round two and then a 63 in the final round. So we love to see those low scores from young players. I like to compare them to rookies in Dynasty Fantasy Football. We're looking for our rookies too. These guys can hit it a mile, and they can definitely hold up for 4 days. So definitely going to be following their career, much like all golf fans will, because we won't have a choice. They're going to be at the top of the leaderboard for years to come. Some other notable names on the John Deere Classic leaderboard. Ben Griffin continues to remain hot. He finished tied fifth. Aaron Rye, Denny McCarthy, those were two favorites going into the week, and they finished top 10. So that's reassuring. Something that I mentioned on last week's episode was sometimes these common names get tossed around so heavily. It's almost like word gets back to the players and they don't play well. Just a joke. But Aaron Rye and Denny McCarthy did both play well when they were expected to. And that goes a long way for me personally. And I think a lot of people who make these golf picks, because there is an element of playing under pressure when it comes to pressure that you've created for yourself, which means that you're playing so well that you're giving yourself opportunities you didn't expect to have. We saw Akshay Bhatia battle that when he missed that 3.5 footer on number 18 after playing, a pretty perfect weekend of golf. And he admitted after the fact that it was just nerves. So with these, not just these young players, but these non-signature players that we're getting to know, specifically the Aaron Ryes or Denny McCarthy's, who do carry over and play into signature events, it's nice to see them hold up under pressure. An opposite example of that, an antonym, if you will, would be Cameron Young. We'll get more into him and into that probably in next week's episode, because I am interested in kind of his storyline that's played out over the last two tournaments as well. Getting back to the John Deere Classic leaderboard, going into the week, I was high on Eric Cole and Seamus Power. So happy that panned out. Eric Cole is a guy who is another sophomore on tour. His rookie season was last year. He had a great rookie season, and I see him down in South Florida on leaderboards, grinding on these mini tours even when he's not on the PGA Tour playing. He loves golf, and he has a really sound support system behind him. He's a great pro. So I was really happy to see his momentum reward us all with a top 10 finish, because his number, I think, was plus 400 for a top 20, which I just felt like was criminal. Seamus Power is another one who has had a great couple seasons, just like, Rye, Ben Griffin, McCarthy, Eric Cole, all those guys. Seamus Power is another one who's had a great couple of seasons, and again, his momentum was just moving in the right direction. It was positive to see him break through. I love those two guys specifically for multiple events coming up. However, I do see an intangible this week of the logistics getting from North America over to Europe, and I can't help but think that it just could affect the game of some of these guys who played this past weekend. So the Eric Coles, the Davis Thompsons, I'll root for them heavily this weekend. I don't think I would want to throw any of my money on them just because there's so many other safer, just more standard options. If this was a tournament, if this was two back-to-back weeks in North America where they just had to drive from one state to another, fly, from one state to another, but it's on the same side of the country, then yeah, of course I'd be saying we need to hop on these guys who were hot last week. I mean, we've literally seen that pan out with some of these easier tournaments over the last few weekends. Like if you're hot, these guys know how to stay hot because they're used to traveling. This one's just different though. And I feel like with these guys who aren't playing in these signature events as often, even though they were hot in a non-signature, can that really carry over to what's basically a major on the DP World Tour? I just have too many questions about it. And I don't like having that many questions when it comes to putting my money on something. But I will take note of it and evaluate it going into this week. One of the pros that I want to evaluate this week is Jordan Spieth. Jordan Spieth finished tied 26 on the John Deere Classic leaderboard last weekend and shot a 63 in round 3. So we highlight low rounds throughout previous events. We talked about Luke Clinton and Michael Thorbjornsen. Now we have to mention Spieth, and I get it that the John Deere Classic is his tournament, and if anything, I just feel like that adds to the potential argument that he could be back because he's grinded this season. As an elite player already, to have to go back and grind in a whole new department that he didn't even know existed, that needed to be worked on, I just feel like that makes him more dangerous than ever. We saw him emerge as a young pro at John Deere Classic, and in some ways, I kind of feel like he's doing it again as his second resurgence. The fact that he won as many majors as he did at such a young age just shows that he has the potential to become one of golf's greatest of all time. And hearing him speak in interviews, he's starting to sound a lot more like Scottie Scheffler in that he's understanding that golf isn't the only thing that's going on in his life, and that he can be a golfer second and actually be a better golfer. I don't know if that's exactly the way that he worded it or meant it, but that was kind of what I took from the interview that I had seen of him previously after the John Deere. He's a guy who I'm really interested in evaluating this week. I think he's one of those that maybe the travel logistics could not kind of wear him down. Or I could see him maybe starting slow but then finishing hot. And I could see that for a lot of these guys that played last weekend. I'm not going to snooze on him. But at the same time, I don't know if I want to trust putting money on him. And that next guy is Rory. We're excited to see Rory. I think that's going to be one of the major storylines of the weekend. Look, with Rory, I think back all the way to the Masters. Not this Masters either. I'm talking about the Masters, the one where he should have walked away with it. I can't remember the specifics of it because it was that long ago. But I know he shot like an 80 or an 82 to basically lose the thing a while ago. I heard a story where he went into Tiger's house and asked Tiger where all of his other trophies that weren't majors were, and Tiger was like, I don't know, I really only care about the majors. And that was like an epiphany for Rory. I think this was like 2 or 3 years ago or something like that. And he said he just wanted to like reprioritize winning majors, right? He's also said recently, after the U.S. Open, I think he said this, he could see himself playing for 10 more years, or maybe before the U.S. Open, because I don't think he said much after the U.S. Open. He said he can see himself playing 10 more years. So pair those two statements together, right? And I think what we're seeing from Rory is putting that plan into action immediately and almost winning the U.S. Open, like basically calling it a year or two out and saying, yeah, I'm going to try to start winning majors more and then doing really, really well immediately in one. And I think he did moderately well in this year's Masters, too. I'm sure he did. He's having a fantastic season. So that gives me hope for Rory. There's no one that wants to see Rory get his 4th major more than me. I promise you that. Graduating high school in 2011, seeing Rory come through in his prime, I've always been a huge fan. He's got the best swing of anybody on tour. We all thought he was going to be Tiger. So it's just sad to see. And I think me, just like anybody, hopes that he's out this week with a positive attitude, which it seems like he will be. This season is much different than last season when it comes to his attitude towards the press and towards just the game, because he's been dragged through it, and we all get that. Much like Spieth, I'm interested to see where Rory's head is at, but for a much different reason than Spieth. Like with Spieth, I'm like, did he travel well? With Rory, it's like, I mean, look, like just to be fair, this is the first time we've seen you since the U.S. Open. So, in my opinion, I think he's going to be just fine. With that being said, I'm not going to put any money on him, and I hope you all understand. I want to evaluate him. I want to see what he looks like going down to the stretch in the playoffs and into the FedEx Cup. I mean, honestly, or just even going into next week. Like, just not going to be today. And if you have any interest in putting money on Rory, my recommendation would just be like, try to practice some discipline this week and just wait until next week, because you'll get more information, and his number isn't even that good anyway this week, because I think he's the favorite. In other news, mildly unrelated, yet still golf related, Keegan Bradley, the next captain of the U.S. Ryder Cup team. Let's go. Keegan, we all love you. Interestingly, Tiger declined. But Keegan accepted. Keegan said he had no idea that he was going to get it. So we just continue to surprise this guy. And he also said he does not care about live or not. He said he's gonna pick the best players. So Bryson should be on the books on that one. And we'll get into that a little bit this episode as well, because one of my picks is the gentleman who is the reason why Bryson is not going to the Olympics. But we'll get to that. This week, the Renaissance Club, North Berwick, Scotland. Our intangibles this week are travel. So all of my picks are pretty much centered around like elite guys who've had great seasons and can be trusted with our money. The first pick is Colin Morikawa, top 20, minus 115. He overall in my power rankings, I had him as third, and I think he is third when it comes to the betting favorites, and that puts him just in a perfect position to be taken as a top 20. Number one is definitely Rory, and I think number two is Xander. So if Colin is 3 or 4, whichever he is, that's usually where I try to start picking guys up for top 20s anyway. I believe right after him is Ludwig Oberg. And Morikawa can be trusted. He's a perfect example. I mean, if you've loosely followed golf for the last 3 seasons, you know exactly what I'm talking about. This isn't Colin Morikawa's first good season. He's been in contention since he turned pro, and he's already a major champion winner. So I like to start there. as my foundation for my picks of the week. Next on the list is Tommy Fleetwood. Let me tell you about Tommy Fleetwood. It's no secret that Tommy has not won a PGA Tour event. I should probably be able to line up the wins that he's won on the DP World Tour. But to be honest, I just think it gets boring to just list like stat after stat after stat. Even my eyes glaze over. So what I've done is pulled up Tommy Fleetwood's finishes this year, because we're looking at basically a top 20 for him this week. You can see at the Travelers Championship, he finished 15th. That's a really good sign, because the Travelers Championship isn't really known for being that difficult of an event. So some guys that other analysts might be high on going into this week, I might be fading just because of like the fact that their skill level could shine at Travelers, and it just didn't. That's not the case for Tommy Fleetwood. He finished 15th. Looking through the rest of the season, you only see one missed cut here in week 10 at Arnold Palmer, which, take it from me, is a tough event. And then, yeah, no more missed cuts of the season. When I'm looking at safety for putting my money on the line, I don't want guys to miss cuts, period. I want them to give themselves an opportunity to be there for the weekend. Nothing frustrates me more than a guy missing the cut and just not giving himself the chance. Another thing that I really like about Tommy Fleetwood, which I think is really important when it comes to the way that I do my picks, is momentum. You can see here that Tommy has been building momentum since the PGA Championship. So tied 26 at the PGA Championship, then tied 21 at the Canadian, tied 20 at Memorial, tied 16 at US Open, and then 15th at the Travelers. Oh my gosh. Like, usually I look for threes. I look for these momentum swings to come in threes. So just 20th and then 16th and 15th would have been enough for me to get my attention normally. But then you see 26, 21, 20, 16, 15. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 events where he's gaining momentum. And then on top of the fact that he's like a veteran on tour, this isn't like we're not just figuring him out. Like, he's already one of the most consistent players as it is. So, as usual, on paper, Tommy Fleetwood is one of the safest, most consistent, and best bets for all categories this week. Top 20, top 10, top 5, and winner. This is not the first time that a podcast host has come onto their show and said those words. I'm just going to be honest with you. Like, if you're new to my show, you definitely haven't heard me say it, but I've been saying it for years that Tommy is elite in the sense that he's one of the most consistent players on tour. He's not elite in the sense that he's like Scottie Scheffler winning every event, but he is elite in that he's one of the most consistent. Now, what's different this year compared to all the other years of consistency that we've seen out of him? He changed his swing coach, and he's working with the Harmons now. I think Butch Harmon, and I think that change happened last season. So it's pretty settled now, and we can see this year it's really paid off. And even last year, it had to, the end of last season. So I love Tommy Fleetwood in a low pressure, kind of DP World Tour vibe situation this weekend. And I think he can be trusted. I think this is a new Tommy Fleetwood we're looking at. He may even get aggressive. I didn't suggest to take anything less than a top 20 this week just because there's so many plus payouts. But homie could be up there at the top 5. Next on the list is a guy who is flashy, and that is his game. It's Minwoo Lee. Again, looking just right off the bat with Minwoo, not many missed cuts. Just like Tommy, he just has the one. His came at the Valspar. I mean, let that be an example of how random golf is, right? Like, tied 22nd at the Masters, and then he misses the week before he missed the cut at Valspar. tied 26 at the PGA, tied 24 at Charles Schwab. Let's look again at momentum building, or momentum building up for Minwoo Lee. We can start at the PGA Championship. But I mean, you could even go back to the Masters. Tied 22 at the Masters, tied 24 at the Byron Nelson, tied 26 at the PGA, 24 at Charles Schwab, 21 at US Open, and then 2 at Rocket Mortgage. I love this so much because it makes sense when you look at it. It makes sense that he didn't really have it all together at Valspar. I think he may have even been injured around this time. Masters tied 22, possibly with an injury. That makes sense. Comes back out, finishing up the injury at the Byron Nelson, and he gets 24th. And then at the PGA Championship gets 26th because it's so competitive. You're seeing all of these, just outside of the top 20 finishes for Minwoo, and you're like, is he going to break top 20? And then he finishes pretty much on the dot at tied 21 at US Open, and then does break through in a huge way at the Rocket Mortgage, tied second. My analysis of Minwoo Lee right now is that there's no one that's more poised and ready to win an event than he is right now, and it's this event. And he's no stranger to winning this event. He won it in 2021. So with all that being said, Minwoo Lee at plus 160 for a top 20. I just don't get it sometimes. I just don't get these numbers. It feels criminal. All my picks last week were plus payouts. It feels like they're just gifting us money. But you got to see through the fog because there's a lot of good players in this event. And golf moves quick. We need to favor the ones that are explosive right now. Minwoo Lee is that player. He plays with swagger. He's a better player when he is playing explosively. And we saw that from Rocket Mortgage. He tried to win that event. I really like him this week. He didn't play last week, so he's rested, didn't travel. For people who are favoring guys from last week's event, I would challenge you to look back to the week before, week 26, which is the Rocket Mortgage, and favor some of those guys. And Minwoo Lee is literally on the top of that list. I'll actually take a sidebar here. Yeah, look at this list. You have Minwoo Lee sat right in the middle of all these guys who played the next week. Okay. Anyway, that's my Minwoo Lee rant for you. Take him. Take him. Bet the mortgage. If your mortgage is 1 unit, bet it, because I'm proposing 1 unit bets across the board this week just because we're evaluating, like I said. I'm not a big weighted guy anyway. All right, next on the list, number 4, Brian Harman at plus 200. Beginning of the season for Brian started out great. Not many missed cuts. Had 2 here kind of in the middle of the season. We're looking at momentum really for Brian this week, again with the 33, 21, and 9. We're looking at good top 20 finishes at RBC Heritage. We're looking at top 5 there at the Players, top 20 at API. He's a major champion winner. His major championship that he won is the Open, the British Open. He's rested. He seems to be in complete control of his game. I think that Brian Harman, I think his plus 200 number is probably, I think it's good value, which is why I took it. And I think because of how good of a season he's having and because of the fact that he is a major champion winner, he should be much higher up on the list. If it weren't for his momentum building right now and his extremely good course history, I'm not sure that I would have him on my list this week. I would prefer to evaluate him and then send him out next week because Brian Harman could very easily go out and shoot a plus 8. We've seen that. But this is one of those guys where I feel like there's too many reasons why he will play well One of those reasons being is that he is so far down on the list. I think this is one of those situations where the pressure is off of him. He surrounds himself in really good company on the tour. The Bulldogs seem to have some really, really stable players out there right now. I really like what all those guys are doing. I'm really happy to trust Harman. He his style of play is a little scary for me when I have money on the line with him, because he's kind of like Terrell Hatton. Like, he's very like dramatic when he does things wrong. So I'm always rooting for him, and I would advise you, if you are watching him and you don't really watch him normally, don't get too nervous when he's yelling at himself, because he does it a lot. Whoa. Sorry, gang. Okay. Final two here. Rounding it out, Wyndham Clark, Robert McIntyre. Robert McIntyre is a little bit of a boring pick, so I can just kind of glaze over him. I just feel like you can't leave him off. He's such a good player in majors, and especially in this event. I know this isn't a major, but he's having a great season. He just won his first PGA Tour event at the RBC Canadian. This is the epitome of me not wanting to miss out. Like, just FOMO. I don't see a world where he doesn't play well. However, sometimes guys, I keep saying this. I mean, I'll probably remove this. Like, they literally just don't. When they're supposed to play well, they don't. You know, we've seen it happen. So you never know with him. That's the reason why we're recommending one unit bets across the board this week. But McIntyre is a great pro. He can be trusted with your money, and he stiffed me last year after playing well, and I thought we could trust him, and I put some good money on him, and that makes me reluctant to go harder on him this year. But I have followed him for more than just 2 years, and I've been seeing him really put things together kind of over the last like 4 or 5 seasons, and I think he's at the point where he can be trusted. I'm going to move on because I feel like I just said the same sentence 4 times. The last guy who I think is extremely undervalued this week is Wyndham Clark. I just don't know how Wyndham Clark is plus 220 for a top 20 finish this week. He is such a great player. I've said this over and over about Wyndham. He has elite talent. Can I just say, you guys don't know me very well. I've been making money off of Wyndham Clark for 2 seasons. For the past 2 seasons. Like clockwork, top 20s with him. Before he broke through and won the U.S. Open last year. Or 2 years ago, whatever it was now. Okay. Composing myself with the Wyndham Clark saga. Here we go. Tied 56 at the U.S. Open. Then it gets announced that he's going to be the 4th member of our Olympic team. After Bryson wins the U.S. Open and shows that he's clearly the best golfer in the world. And we'll get into him next episode for the Open, because I don't see how anyone can beat him right now. Anyway, Bryson wins the U.S. Open, and they announced that Wyndham Clark is going to be our 4th player because Bryson plays for the Live Tour. And then Wyndham turns around and shoots or finishes tied 9th at the Travelers. And if you watched him play the Travelers, like I said, it's known for being an easy event. He was grinding. Like, U.S. Open Wyndham Clark grinding. Like, he's mad. I get it. He deserves to be on the team. Even if Bryson was still here. What Wyndham Clark has done since winning the U.S. Open, taking it to Scotty at the Players. I know he's kind of he's fizzled off a little bit, but I mean, he finished 3rd at RBC Heritage. The common theme of this podcast episode has become FOMO, not wanting to miss out this week. The storylines are all lining up for Wyndham Clark to absolutely go TF off. You feel me? TF, meaning the off. Okay? he has that capability in him to just run away with this thing. He has a really good course history at this event, and in my opinion, possibly being a guy who could play well in one of these, but then not play well in both, right? I'd like him in this one when the pressure's off, kind of like how Travelers was. His momentum's building. Like I said, I usually like to go in threes, so this should be his third. And if he went tied 56, tied ninth, for him to beat that would have to be like a top 10. And I think he's worth a top 10. I think his top 10 number is like plus 1,000. It's insane. I'm not going to recommend it officially, but yeah, I mean, it was definitely on my expanded list. But there's just so much that I want to see this week before I would feel good about putting anything on any of that. This is essentially kind of like a non-signature event as far as my strategy goes. In non-signature events, I feel like anyone could win. Like anyone can have a good day because all these guys are elite. And that's kind of how I feel about this event. Like, it's just a big field. And, like, yeah, it's a lot of good players. And just all these players on the tour are good. So you've got to lean towards the people who are hot right now. And I feel like that the list that I just gave is that. I want to throw an honorable mention in. Like, this pick is absolutely blowing my mind. I had a pick like this pop up at the Players. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. David Lingmerth. You can go back and spot check me because there's receipts. He finished high on the leaderboard. It was definitely a top 20. But I think I may have even taken him for a top 10. There's obviously not receipts on that. I might be able to find it somewhere. Not like it's really relevant. This pick reminds me of that. Like, Lingmerth had great course history at the event. He seemed to be hot at the time, and I'm like, for plus like 1,200 or whatever it was, I was like, yeah, I'm definitely gonna dabble, as some people would say, sprinkle. This event has a very similar value proposition in Padraig Harrington. It's not a prop bet, sorry, but the Padraig Harrington top 20 number is plus 1,400, and I'm a big line movement guy. Of course, like, I feel like you gotta be. That top 20 line opened at plus 1,600. And in a matter of 24 hours, it's already dropped to plus 1,400 because Padraig Harrington won a senior tour event like recently within the last 2 months. He's in fantastic shape. He actually hits the ball in some cases as far as some of these guys on tour. He's a veteran, obviously, one of the greatest of all time, and would be motivated to play well because Bernhard Langer just retired from the DP World Tour. And I know that, like, I mean, obviously it's got to be emotional forever. I mean, I'm not even from their generation, and I felt like it was emotional. I just feel like Padraig Harrington is the type of guy who would go out this week and, like, take pride in competing hard for their generation. And to be fair, he actually is better than, like, some of these guys in the field. The fact that the line movement moved from 1,600 to 1,400 is, like, exciting. And then the icing on the cake for me was that he's a player. When the course was built, the Renaissance Club, he was a player's consultant for the course. And I'm sitting here just like, what? Like, he already, like, enough. It already seemed like a good enough value just because he's won a senior tour event and he's in good shape in the Bernhard Langer storyline. And then it turns out that he was a player's consultant for the Renaissance Club. So I'm taking a little Padraig Harrington this weekend for, unfortunately, plus 1,400 because I didn't think it would drop from 16, and it did. I just love that storyline. Honestly. I think I would like to round out the show with just giving my top 20, top 10, top 5, and winner in a dark horse. Just 'cause I think it's fun. These aren't like official picks that I'd recommend making. It's just like just a fun way for me to finish the show. My top 20, I love Colin Morikawa at the minus 115. I think that's so fair. I think it's like the best value for the top 20. A top 10, or your best value at top 10, I think, is going to be Xander. Hold on, give me a second. I want to pull these numbers up. You got Xander at plus 100. Love that. I think Xander's going to be there at the top 10. Top 5. Oh, ooh. I've got to go with Jeez, I got to go with one of my guys, Minwoo Lee or Tommy Fleetwood. I feel like one of those guys has got to be top 5 this week. Statistically, consistency, momentum, elite play, all of it. I feel like it's got to be one of those two. And then the winner this week. Wow. I definitely think the winner is going to come from the top 25 in the power rankings. Oh, I want to throw an honorable mention to Tom Kim out there. He needs to fall under my evaluation category. I'm really excited to see how he plays. He's such a good young talent, and he's going to be there's times where you can really trust him with your money. I think he's probably going to be fine this weekend, but I just held off. I think he's going to be someone we talk about pretty heavily next episode. Not to get too off track, the winner this week, look, I'll just go with, just to say that we did it. Let's just go with, I want to go with Minwoo Lee. I don't want to go with one of my guys as the winner, but I actually really feel like it's going to be one of them. I feel like it's honestly going to be Minwoo Lee or Wyndham Clark, to be real with you. I just have this really good feeling about Wyndham Clark. Yeah, I guess I'll just go with one of them. I mean, I don't know. I'll just go with Wyndham Clark. Like, one. I feel like Minwoo Lee, he had the chance to get it done at Rocket Mortgage and just didn't happen. I feel like Wyndham Clark is like that guy. It would be insane. It would be such an insane storyline if Wyndham Clark won it. So, yeah, I get whatever. I'll just go with him. I mean, picking a winner is so hard to do anyway. So, if you made it this far in in this episode, thank you so much for listening. I hope that this episode provides some good value for you. I definitely didn't expect it to be this long, so I'll hop off now. But again, thank you so much, and yeah, best of luck to you this weekend.